is that we are going to do fraction and mixed number, multiplication and division. I'm going to do two that are representative of what I would say are the hardest two that are on your homework tonight. We're going to do what we did last night where your homework is just going to be the practice sheet. Again, it's got matching on it so you can kind of see whether or not you're doing it right as you go along. So I'm going to work one example of the multiplying, one example of the dividing for you, and then just give you the rest of the time to practice today. So example number 1, we are going to multiply first. We are going to multiply two mixed numbers. We're going to multiply negative 6½ times negative 1 1/4. I would say one of the most common issues that I see people do with this is that they get their rules mixed up and they get a common denominator. Not that there's necessarily anything wrong with getting a common denominator, but you don't need it when you're multiplying and dividing. And then it ends up making you get bigger numbers that make it harder to multiply and divide. So big red flag, don't get a common denominator. You don't need it, okay? Now our first step, another common mistake, I'm sorry, let me back up. Some people do this. I'm writing it in red, right? So that means it's wrong. I see people separate when they're doing mixed numbers. They try to multiply the whole numbers together, and then they try to multiply the fractions together and then put it all. You can't do that. Does not work. You will not get the correct product if we do it that way. Okay, your first step is that you've got to convert to an improper fraction. Now, your homework tonight, they're not all mixed numbers. Okay, so I'm actually going to say in parentheses, if needed. Obviously, if it's already a fraction, you don't need to do this. Okay, but if needed, you need to convert it to an improper fraction first. If we've forgotten how to do that, I can give you some extra practice. I'm going to assume for our purposes here, we know what we're doing. Elementary, middle school, a lot of teachers gave you this little graphic where you like multiplied and then you added. So 6 times 2 is going to be 12. 12 plus 1 means this is going to be 13. And then the denominator is just the denominator from the fraction. And then 4 times 1, of course, is 4. Plus 1 is 5. So this is going to become negative 13 over 2 times negative 5 over 4. So our first step is to convert those to improper fractions. Now, if this problem called for it, we would mention a little thing called canceling. If that's not ringing a bell to you, I will explain to you what that is in the next problem. This problem does not involve any canceling, though. 13 over 2 and 5 over 4 are as simple as they can get. So I'm just going to move on to the next step at this point, which is why multiplying and dividing is the easiest one, because we just multiply across. So we're going to do 13 times 5. We're going to do 2 times 4. This one's the easy one. Somebody better check me, though, and make sure I multiply correctly today because you know how I am first thing in the morning. So I believe that's going to be 65 over 8. And then, of course, we need to apply the sign. So we got to revert back to those integer rules. In this case, so I'm going to put in parentheses, we've got a negative times a negative. So that is going to give us a positive. So I don't need to do anything else with that. Now, teachers differ about whether, because this is as simplified as it's going to get. There is not a common factor between 65 and 8, so it's simplified. Teachers differ about whether they consider that simplified or not, or whether you need to change it back into a mixed number. In Algebra 1, you probably remember from 8th grade, slope is in fractions, right? So most of the time, I don't want you to change that back into a mixed number, because here in algebra, we're going to be doing improper fractions because we're going to do a heck of a lot of slope. However, on your worksheet tonight, so that you know for the sake of matching, you do want to make sure you can, a lot of the time, it will convert it back into a mixed number. So in this case, don't forget, 8 would go into 64 8 times, right? Because 8 times 8 is 64, so that's your whole number. And then you have 1 out of 8 left over. So for our purposes here in class and the way we'll regularly operate, 65 over 8 is fine by me to leave as an improper fraction. But for your purposes to check yourself tonight on your homework, you're going to need to know how to switch it back because the answer is going to be in a mixed number form. Questions, comments, concerns? We good? Okay, problem number 2, we're going to divide. And we are going to divide negative 11 1/4 divided by 15 over 16. So a mixed number divided by a fraction. Remember those parentheses? I put a lot of extra parentheses in there just to get you used to the fact. It really doesn't mean anything, but it's organizing it. Okay, I want you to get used to seeing those. All this is just a plain old division problem. Just like multiplication, you don't need a least common multiple, common denominator, any of that. But you do need to convert that mixed number into a fraction first. So convert if needed. Because we already wrote that in the top, I'm going to abbreviate to mixed number. If you want to write it out, by all means, please write it out. I write as little as possible myself, but okay, so of course 4 times 11 is going to be 44 plus 1. So that's going to be a negative 45 over 4. Somebody double check me because Lord knows I could screw up. And we don't need to do anything to that 15 over 16. Okay, now I'm going to talk about that canceling that I mentioned a minute ago. Actually, no, that's not true. I'm going to do the other thing first. Okay, now, I hate when I'm getting ready to write down, I hate that this is how 6th and 7th grade teachers teach division. But I know this is what they all tell you to do, where you memorize some little stupid expression like, when dividing fractions, I don't know why, just, what? Just change the sign and multiply. Ugh, I hate it, okay? Or just flip the second and multiply and all that. I really want you to actually learn why that works. However, by the time we get to Algebra 1, I don't have time to explain to you why it works. So because I know they all use these expressions, I'm just going to suck it up and I'm going to deal with it. So keep. I know y'all have heard this one, right? The keep, change, flip. Yep, I hate it. I'd rather teach you why the rule works so that you actually understand and remember, but we ain't got time for all that by the time we get to high school. So keep the first the same. Change the multiplication to, or I'm sorry, the division. Whoops. I don't know what I just did there, guys. Okay, there we go. Change the division to multiplication. And we're at least going to talk like mathematicians here. We're going to say take the reciprocal of the second. Reciprocal is one of those words. Reciprocal. Okay. I always have to think about that. So negative 45 over 4 stays the same. Change that division to multiplication. And take the reciprocal of the second one. The expression I hate, but I know you all hear it. Keep, change, flip. Now this is where I'm going to mention the thing that'll help you out a little bit, especially since you can't use a calculator on Friday. When you have some big numbers like that to multiply, you can simplify it ahead of time by a little thing we call canceling. Okay, so I am going to do, now this is what I call an optional step. You don't have to do this step, but man, it sure will be easier for you. So we are going to cancel. Some teachers do a really good job of teaching you how to do this. Some don't do a great job. So we're going to cancel common factors. So let me show you what I mean. I'm going to rewrite negative 45 over 4 times 16 over 15. So 45 can be broken up into 15 times 3. The same way that this can be broken up into 15 times 1. There is a common factor there. It can apply to as long as they're diagonal or on top of each other, you can cancel. So you notice there's a 15 in the denominator of that fraction. There's a 15 times 3 will get you that 45. So that means that you're going to be able to cancel out those two 15s. I'm going through this pretty quickly because hopefully this is review for you guys. 4, obviously, is 4 times 1, and 16 is 4 times 4. So once again, there is a common factor that you can cancel out. If what I just did is confusing to you, that's not ringing a bell, I'm going to add another little example video specifically on canceling on Google if you need help with that. And again, it's optional. You don't have to cancel, but man, look, it sure does make it easy now, because instead of having to multiply 45 times 16, now when I do step 4, which is multiply across, now I only have to multiply 3 times 4 in the numerator and 1 times 1. Man, that sure was a lot easier. Why am I getting ready to do all of that hard work? And yet I'm getting ready to get it wrong at the very, very end, even though I just did everything else right. Yes, ma'am. Well, I got to make sure I go back and deal with the signs. Yes, ma'am. So step 5, don't do all that hard. So I'm going to uncircle that because I'm not done yet. Don't do all that hard work and then miss it because you forgot step 5. Apply the sign. In this case, we had a negative times a positive. So that is going to equal a negative. So our final quotient, answer to a division problem, is negative 12.